I was in a pretty bad way. Yeah, I'd hit rock bottom in my life, basically. I felt like I was running out of all options. I was running out of money. I was running out of work, and I was about to lose my apartment. And so yeah, so life was pretty tough. I Basically, I was living in London, and like all capital cities, it's very hard to get by unless you're successful. And at that point, the only kind of work that I was actually picking up was manual labouring work, whatever I could find, whether it was working on construction sites, washing up, the pots and dishes in a kitchen in a restaurant, whatever, and all that stuff. I was starting to run out of that kind of work because I was not very good at manual labouring, and it's a very skilled work, especially in the field of construction sites. So yeah, so life was pretty dire for me at that point. Yeah.
And what did you think of the future at that point? What were you expecting?
Well, I'd moved to London because I hoped, that that I would find all some options, and I thought I'd find some opportunities because I always figured that, like all capital cities of the world, they're the places where people make something of themselves. And I'd left school with very little qualifications, and where I'd grown up, there were only two options basically, and that was to either work in a factory, which I didn't particularly want to do because again I wasn't any good at that kind of thing, or have no work at all. So yeah, so I'd moved to London, and when I moved there, a lot of the people that became my friends were working in the entertainment industry, music or arts, and they were all successful. So I was hoping that I would be part of that world, and I really wanted to be because I could see that they'd made a success of themselves without really having any past qualifications. They hadn't been to university or anything like that. So I thought, why not me? So yeah, so those were my dreams, were to be part of that entertainment industry. Yeah,
Right. And then all of a sudden, something happens and your life completely changes.
that's right.
So,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happened?
Well, as I say, I was about to lose my apartment, and I my sister was living out in the countryside with her family, and she said, "Why don't you come stay with us for a few weeks?" So I did do. So I went and stayed there, and um, uh, a friend had come to visit me from London, and she'd got to get back to London. So I took her to the rail station to see her off, and I helped her onto the car, onto the carriage of the train with her bags. And when I gave her a hug and stepped back to get off, my coat got trapped in the automatic closing doors, and I couldn't pull it free. It was a very thick quality sheepskin coat, and it was like three-quarter length, so it wasn't going to come out. So yeah, so I got dragged along the platform, and the train pulled out at great speed. I lost my footing, and then I got pulled eventually underneath the wheels of the train, and the train sped on, and by a miracle, I survived. So yeah, so that was very horrific. That was very terrifying.
Can imagine. And how long did this whole bit take until they stopped the train and somebody came to save you?
Well, the the UK Rail Police did a massive inquiry on it. So they told me that it took from the moment of the train pulling out to me going under was 13 and a half seconds. It felt it felt like a lot longer. It felt like time had stretched, I thought it took minutes, but no, it was seconds. Um, but basically, what happened was I was thrown around relentlessly underneath this train as it was continuing on, and then I was eventually thrown down in between the tracks, and then the train kind of disappeared off down the horizon as I lay there. So, but it wasn't for several minutes until the train actually stopped right out in the middle of the countryside. So my friend told me anyhow, because she wasn't able to alert anybody because there was no guard around. She was running through the train trying to find somebody to stop the train, you know, and so yeah, so it was quite some time on until it actually stopped. But thankfully, I wasn't still attached at that point.
And by a miracle, you survived. Do
Exactly,
you
yeah.
know what the odds are of surviving such an accident?
Well, according to the rail police, I should not have survived it. You know, they said they'd done all their figures, and they said that they still don't know why and how I survived that. So really, I'm sure we all know that the odds are pretty low in surviving that. But I realise now that there was something bigger at play that was that saved me that day. Something of far more powerful, and though we don't have a scientific explanation for that, there's lots of things in science that we don't have answers to. So it's you know it's something that I've never really doubted, because obviously I'm here, and yeah, something far greater saved me.
Absolutely. And wow, that's just I think I've heard that before and I've heard your story before, but I think every time it's just yeah, chills.
Yeah.
So then somebody saves you and takes you to the hospital. What happens there?
Right. Well, I got to the hospital, and it was a good sort of 30-minute drive to the hospital itself, and but by the time I got into the hospital, I was losing copious amounts of blood. There was a whole team of medics waiting there for me when I arrived into the emergency department. They started working on me, and I could hear fear in their voices. You know, I could detect it, and I knew that it wasn't all over yet. So I was still pretty scared myself that I was going to make it. And I remember my family arrived at the hospital, which again seemed pretty bizarre because I thought, wow, how did all that happen? And how did they manage to suddenly arrive? You know, they come of a 30-minute drive themselves, but there they were. And I spoke with them. You know, my mother was in tears. You know, she was just completely distraught. The whole family were in shock, obviously. And all I wanted to do was talk to my friend Anna, who I'd been seeing off, because I knew that she'd been through hell herself, watching this all unfold, because she was looking through the window of the train carriage, and I thought she's going to be pretty shook up, and I just wanted to connect with her and talk with her, you know. And she was like completely, her face was white with shock, and she was like shaking her head from side to side, saying, "I thought you were dead. They announced that you were
Mhm.
dead, and I saw you go under, and I knew that you wouldn't survive it." So she was amazed that I was alive. It was at that point that I left my body. I left all the drama of the hospital. You know, I left all the severe pain that was rushing through my body, and I went into another realm. Um, and I entered what felt like, I thought, was a small darkened space. It wasn't a foreboding darkness. It was very calm and welcoming.
Mhm.
And I figured at this stage that I hadn't made it. I thought, okay, I must be dead now, you know, because the odds were stacked up against me surviving at that point. And anyhow, I didn't panic. I didn't fear it. I didn't try and resist it. I looked around to try and get my bearings, and I remember seeing these beautiful pulsating colors of light that were just slowly pulsating all around me, and the lovely light that was glowing from these orbs of color were making me feel very calm and very safe. So I thought, I realized I was on a completely different. I was no longer on the hospital bed that I'd been on, this hospital trolley or whatever. You know, I was now laid out on a huge slate rock. It was like a huge medieval altar, is the best way I describe it. But it felt surprisingly comfortable to lay on. And I looked to check my wounds, because I the first thing I'd seen when the train had moved on was that my left arm had been cut, had been severed from the elbow down, and but everything was back in place. Not even a single sort of scratch or bruise which was amazing, and that made me feel again very safe and comforted. So I laid my head back, and I realized I was now covered in this beautiful sheet. It was no longer the hospital sort of sheet that they put over you or whatever, the blanket. It was like a silk satin material, and it was like this beautiful light blue. And there was light reflecting off this beautiful sheet. And when I looked up, I looked above my head, and there were three symmetrical grids of white light that were slowly closing in on me. And as they got closer to me, I couldn't take my gaze away from this light, even though it was really intensely bright. Normally, uh, sorry, my headphones will keep coming.
Yes.
So normally, I wouldn't have an issue, with this kind of light. I would do. Sorry, my eyes wouldn't be able to look into that kind of light. But in this absolute plane that I could look into this beautiful light. In fact, I didn't want to take my gaze away because I felt there was a healing energy coming from the light. And so I closed my eyes again, feeling very safe and comforted. Um, and as time went on, I felt suddenly the presence of somebody had arrived at the scene, as it were. So I opened my eyes and lifted my head, and there, stood at my feet, was this beautiful being of light, an androgynous person wearing a very simple contemporary black t-shirt with this pure white blonde hair and skin that was illuminating light from within. And this person was just smiling at me, and I felt safe and comforted by this person. I felt this person was here to guard me. And I actually said out loud to this person, "I know your face, don't I? Who are you? Where do I know you from?" I couldn't quite figure it. It's just like, sometimes you can meet somebody at a party and you feel like you've known them throughout the whole of your life, even though it's the first time you've met them. It was like that. And this person just kept gazing back at me and just smiled with a knowing smile. So I laid my head back anyhow, feeling protected. And and enjoyed the energy coming from, not only from the light now, but from this person. And then I felt this energy was like sort of like intensified, and I felt like, I felt like my body started to sort of vibrate almost like with an energy of love. And I opened my eyes and I looked, and either side of me were two female forms, and they both got their hands slowly hovering over the surface of my body, going over every single contour. And there was this energy of healing love that was just emanating from their hands. It was just like really beautiful. And the girl to my right was quite European in her appearance, again in a very simple contemporary brown dress, whereas the girl to my left was more Asian Indian or American Indian in appearance, and wearing a more traditional dress. Um, and again, I felt I'd known these people throughout my whole life, and I thought, who are they? Who are these people? And I could only assume at this stage that they were my guardian angels, as we all refer to in our lives, that they'd been with me throughout the whole of my life, guarding and looking over me. I just hadn't been able to connect with them up until this point. Um, so it was at this stage I started to think about my family, because, as I say, they'd been pretty distraught, and my mother was just crying, and I just thought they're going to be really upset now because clearly I've not made it. I've passed on. So I tried to ease myself over the edge of this huge sort of great rock that I was laid on, and I looked down hoping to see them. And when I did look down, um, I couldn't see them at all in the hospital. But what I did see was this most beautiful, awesome sight. It was a huge waterfall of stars. And instead of millions of tons of water cascading over the edge of this waterfall of stars, there were billions of sparkling stars that were just slowly cascading over, and there were shooting stars flying over and down through the middle. And I just thought, wow. And I realized I was not in a small darkened room as I'd initially thought, that I was actually in the universe itself, and I was part of this universe. And it was just a tremendous feeling, a liberating feeling to know that I was there. And I had no fear whatsoever of this at all. I had no fear of this great abyss that I was staring down into, only awe. And the more that I fixed my gaze, the further I could look down, and the more colors and nebulas I could see forming. And I just thought, wow, this is remarkable. And I hoisted myself back over. And I remember thinking to myself, I was upset about my family that I hadn't seen them, but not in a way that I would normally have felt before. I would have felt a lot of angst and guilt and worry and concern. Whereas I remember saying to myself, "Oh well, they'll get over this, and they will get to experience this beautiful realm themselves one day, and they'll experience the fact that life goes on, and this is the next stage for them as well." And so I laid out flat again on this huge rock and closed my eyes. The most profound part of this whole experience was to happen right at the end. As I lay there with my eyes closed, I felt this energy of love, this beautiful unconditional love that was happening all around me, suddenly intensified tenfold. So I lifted my head once more, and just beyond the person stood at my feet, with the white blonde hair, was this huge tunnel of white light. It was slowly coming through the universe, through the stars, and coming towards me. And this huge tunnel of white light was surrounded by these very dramatic flames, that was slowly circulating around this very intense bright white light, which again I couldn't take my gaze away from. And I knew at this point that what I was staring at was God. This was the source of all creation, not in the usual form of God that I'd seen in my textbooks at school or what have you, or the image of God with the long beard in by the Renaissance painters. And this was God in the form of this huge tunnel of white light, and the energy just causing every single molecule of my body to vibrate with love from this source of all creation. I remember laughing to myself with absolute joy and pleasure. And it was at that point that I came crashing back into my body. I was back in the hospital, and suddenly the beautiful white light was now, it was the fluorescent strip in the hospital that was just screaming into my eyes. And the noise was just kind of like overbearing. And the pain came rushing through the whole of my body.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to take a second to discuss the way you saw God, because I think it's very different than what we normally think of God looking like. So I wanted to ask you, before this whole experience, were you a religious person? Did you believe in God? What was your relationship with religion?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because really, I was both my parents were Christian, and so when I was young, when I was a kid, we went to church, and I didn't really feel comfortable going to church. I didn't really get it, as a young infant. I just felt it didn't work for me. I was never what we would call an atheist, but I just didn't believe in the church at that point. My parents were very liberal, and they said, "That's okay. You don't need to go. You can stay at home on Sundays," which I did. So from that point on, I never really entertained the thought of religion or thinking about God or anything. My whole lifestyle when I was growing up and when I'd moved to London was quite hedonistic, I guess. So it was all about living for the I don't know, living day to day and not really thinking about faith or religion. I wish I had. It would have helped me an awful lot through those difficult times. So yeah, so it hadn't really entered my thoughts. And as I say, obviously at school, we had religious education. So that's how I knew about seeing all these paintings of the images of God, on the ceiling of the Vatican and what have you. But no, I didn't. It didn't really come into my lifestyle.
And one curiosity that I had, I know that you've mentioned previously, when you got well afterwards, you were interested in what kind of meds you were on while they were taking care of you in the hospital,
Yeah.
just to sort of understand if anything could have interfered with your consciousness and could have potentially caused what you experienced. My interest is more, why did you have that question? Was it something inside of you that wanted to know? Or was it more brought on by the people around you?
Yeah, it wasn't me. I had no doubts at all about what had happened. Such a powerful thing to happen that I didn't question it and never have done. Um, I did it really because I uh, I knew that I wanted to write my story and I wanted to write a book, and I thought if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this right. When I say right, I knew that I'd be questioned. I'd be doing interviews, and that's and quite fair enough. That some people would question what had happened to me. Some people might say, "Well, maybe there were mind bending drugs that you were given and stuff like that." So that's why I decided. I got a friend who lectured in nursing, and I spoke to her and I said, "Look, if I can buy my records from the hospital, if I give them to you to look through, would you be able to, give me your answers on what they were and what kind of effect they would have had on me and stuff?" So that's why I did it. Yeah, because people do question. It's part of the way we all are. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't mind it. I'm quite happy to speak with people who are coming from a scientific point of view, because I believe in science as well, because without science, I wouldn't be sat here talking to you now. I mean, science saved me as well, even though I talked about something more powerful than all of us, saved me on that particular day in the accident itself. That I do know that science, you know, the doctors and the consultants who are amazing in the hospital, I've got nothing but respect for them. So yeah, so I wanted to do it from that perspective.
Makes sense. And also, I wanted to touch upon the people around you. How did you deal with, I think, the questions? Because I think coming out and telling your story about what happened is a very brave thing to do. I think it's very courageous, but it might also open you up and make you vulnerable to the opinions or the judgment of others, potentially not believing or questioning or just basically tainting this memory, this experience that you've had with their own thoughts and opinions about it. How did you go around that?
Um, well, it's I guess when something this powerful happens to you, something so life changing, that it's hard to deny it. I knew straight away, when I was coming around, because after the actual when I came back into the hospital after the NDE itself, I was wheeled into theatre and I was under anaesthetic for 8 hours after that. And then when I came through, I remember lying in the the hospital bed in my room, and I remember thinking to myself, I was contemplating what had just happened. Going under a train was huge, but I couldn't stop thinking about the whole experience itself. And all I could think about then was, how am I going to tell the world about this? I've got to tell as many people as possible about this. It's really important that people know about this. And I've never lost that sensation that the importance of that to me personally, anyhow, to share this knowledge, because it's such a positive, beautiful message that I received, and I want to share that. And of course, there are always going to be people out there who are going to challenge that, and as I say, I don't mind. It's interesting because one thing I've started doing since I have come back from this is I watch lots of TV programs and documentaries about the universe and how the universe works, and the scientific knowledge that's being gained on the origins of the universe. And the more and more I watch these programs, it's interesting because a lot of the scientists that I really respect, they turn around and say, "Do you know what? We're only at the edge of understanding how the universe works. Even though we're scientists, we don't have all the answers." And that's absolutely true. And I also remember my consultant in hospital saying to me, I was, when I was recovering, I remember asking him questions, and he said to me one day, he said, "David, even though we're consultants, we're not experts. We just try our best, and that's it." So, the trouble is that we're all set up to think that there should be a scientific explanation for everything in life, and that's the problem. But and I think once we stop and realize that we don't have a scientific explanation for everything, that then there's nothing wrong with investigating and looking into hearing stories like mine. And because I'm not out to really make any great gain out of this, other than try to give a positive message, basically. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you've written a book about your experience, Shine On, because you wanted to spread the message and you wanted people to know about your story.
Yeah.
Why do you think that it's important that people who have similar experiences share their stories?
Well, because what I've realized is that a lot of people actually fear death, and that's no surprise because it's never really talked about. We don't prepare for death. We prepare for everything else in life: birth, marriage, even taking our driving tests, but we don't prepare for death. And then that's kind of, now to me, that seems pretty bizarre, because it's going to come to us all, and we may as well at least look into it and try and sort of do some research into what's into death and stuff. So I kind of figured that it's important from that point of view, that, and also from my own perspective, my belief is that the soul lives on, that this is not the end, and that that this is only one part of our journey. And I think that's for me, if a lot of us believe that and feel that, that can't be a bad thing. That can help us with our day-to-day lives as well, because understanding death and understanding what comes next, and feeling that like a weight is lifted from that fear that's buried deep inside us, is a positive feeling. Well, that's what I found for myself anyhow.
Has your view on death changed before and after this experience?
Yeah, totally. It's as I say, the soul is too great an entity to just suddenly stop. Yes, when we die, the body closes down and fades, and but the soul continues on. The soul is such a powerful thing. You know, I've I've lost both my parents over the past few years, and it also helped me with that. Obviously, I I grieved for them physically, their loss and stuff, but knowing that when they passed, their souls were going on to this next stage of life, made me feel a lot better about it. Made me feel a lot more positive that it wasn't simply the end for them. And so it's totally changed my perspective. That it's helped me to deal with other people's with the loss of other people as well. So yeah, whereas before, it would have been a struggle. It would have been a struggle for me losing my parents and wondering what whether that was it, whether their lives were all in vain, if you like, that it was all over and that was the end. But no, that's not the case for me now. I believe that the soul continues on. Yeah.
And would you mind speaking a bit more about how you've managed to deal through this grief, knowing what you know now? Because I think there's lots of people watching this that will have lost somebody dear, and they're just struggling to understand why has this happened? Why is this happening now? And how can I just make it through because I'm still here and they've moved on?
I think one thing to remember, and that is that love continues on. Love never dies, basically. That I feel the love of my parents still now. It's not like it's ended. It's not like they've both passed and the love is no longer there. I still feel just as loved by them now as I did when they were alive and when I was a kid. And I still feel the same love for them as well. And I think it's worth trying to kind of connect with that. If you've just lost somebody, try to allow yourself to feel that love for that for the person who's just passed, who you love, and try and feel their love back, because you will find it, you will connect with it. It's something. It's something I remember when I was younger. You'd see those phrases written a lot. It's on people's gravestones saying "love never dies" and things like that. And I used to think, yeah, yeah, yeah. What does that mean? Love never dies. But now I thought, no, that's a really powerful message, and it's a very powerful message that we should try to take with us when we lose someone, because it doesn't, just like the soul. If the soul doesn't die, then love comes from the soul. That's where it comes from. It doesn't come from the head. Love comes from the soul. When you're in love with somebody, or they're in love with you, it's their soul that loves you, and it's not their head. Maybe, yeah, sometimes, when we think we're in love, like infatuation. Infatuation, that's head love. Whereas like real love is coming from the soul, from one soul to another. So yeah, so that's something to try and take with you, I feel.
Have you ever wondered throughout these years, why has this happened to you? And by this, I mean you traveling through the universe, being able to have an experience that most people don't have. Why do you think it happened to you?
Um, it's a tough one to answer that, because it's for me. It's just I can see how it was part of my journey. For me personally, I can see that my life was just going so terribly wrong, and that every single door I was trying to press open wasn't opening, and that I reached rock bottom. I'd literally run out of money. I was down to about my last pound coin, and it was, so for me, it felt like I was being given a second chance. And I guess it was just that was part of my journey. That was part of my destiny, from the moment I came into this earth realm, to the point of that accident. That was destined for me. And we all have different destinies. I mean, I remember thinking, going back to my days in London, when I said that all my friends that I hung around with, who are successful beyond belief, some of them, in the music industry. And I thought, how come them and not me? But now I look back and realize, well, that was their journey. That was part of their journey. That, in all fairness, they've not been challenged quite so much. They're having a good sort of experience in this realm. Their life is treating them kind, and it's going well for them. So no one single soul is going to have the same journey as the other. So I don't think it's good to compare and say, oh, he's having a better journey than me, or I'm having a better journey than somebody else because I had a near death experience, because I'm not. It's just part of my life story, and this is how it happened for me. And I don't have the answers really to everything. Obviously, you don't come back completely like super powered from a near death experience, and that's probably the best way I can answer it, really.
And that sort of brings me closer to the next question that I had for you, which was, if you would be able to go back and take it all away and never have that train accident and never have the experience that followed, what would you do?
Um, Obviously, the train accident was horrific. It was, it's not something that I'd want to go through again, and it's physically, it and mentally, it's scarred me. You know, it's something that I still have never got over, and probably never will. Um, but I wouldn't I wouldn't trade it for, for the, yeah, I wouldn't trade it because my life now is just has got so much more for me personally, a lot more purpose, and it feels complete a lot. And I certainly wasn't complete before. And I'm not just talking about, security wise, financially, or anything like that. I'm just talking about me as a whole person. I feel so much more complete, and life makes a lot more sense to me. And so yeah, I wouldn't trade it at all.
I also wanted to ask about your career because now you're a painter, you compose classical music, and your career just took a whole different turn. You know, we spoke at the beginning about the kind of work that you were doing that you said yourself you weren't too good at. And
Mm.
now you're really at the top of your career. So, how do you talk about that change? And especially, I think what I would want to know is, do you think something changed in your talents and skills since that experience? Or do you think that that talent was always within you? You just hadn't uncovered it properly before?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Now I've realised that those talents were within me. They were deeply suppressed because when I was at school, because I was, academically, I was struggling. That my teachers at school suppressed any thoughts or notions of wanting to be an artist or a musician. You know, they said that the only work you're going to be able to do in life is working in a factory, as I pointed out earlier. So I'd given up well, I had no dreams or hopes that I'd be doing anything like I'm doing now. The one thing I will say is that when I straight after the only reason I started painting was because I wanted to try and convey what had happened to people in some form. And I thought a painting would be the best way to do it. And I was also scared I was going to forget everything as well. I thought if I do a huge painting like those big Renaissance paintings, like the big biblical scenes, you see in the Vatican, that I thought that that's the best way to convey it to people. And I got this strange sense of sort of like not egoism, but like a sort of sense of belief in myself. And I thought I can do this. I can do this painting. And so when I started painting, I found that I was apprehensive when I first started, but it was coming together really quickly, and I felt that I was channeling channeling ideas through from this other realm, and I was being helped along. So there was a sense of me that was channeling ideas through. So I was being given a crash course in how to technically put a painting together, to apply paint, to bring colors into skin tones and stuff. And then with music, I started writing music. And the bizarre thing about that is that I'm not classically trained at all, but I'm now writing music for orchestra. So that is pretty bizarre. But I would also say that it's all it's not, you don't have to have a near death experience to discover these hidden talents within yourself. It's really, it was a spiritual awakening. And when you have a spiritual awakening, you view life in a complete, it's almost like the sort of the lens has been cleaned for the first time, and you can see clearly all around you 360 degrees. And that's how it was. And so I don't know. So I feel that there's a sense of me, yes, totally, that these gifts were within me before, and but they I'm still learning. I'm still learning my craft. I'm still growing, and I feel that each thing that I do, I'm getting better technically at both my music and my art. So it's a growing process. But it's there for all of us, you know. It's just, you know, this, you read about these things. Well, I do now anyhow, because I'm always fascinated by it. Especially in the pandemic, I found that a lot of people were discovering this. You know, in the pandemic, when people could no longer go into work and were staying at home, you were seeing it all over the internet. People were saying they're all doing Zoom meetings for the first time, and they're all saying, "Hey, you know, I'm baking bread for my family for the first time. Hey, I'm painting. I'm being an artist for the first time. Hey, I'm appreciating nature, the birds and the trees for the first time in my life." So it's all there within all of us, and it doesn't need to be a near-death experience to bring out those qualities that are suppressed by our day-to-day lives.
Absolutely. And it's quite a difference that I'm noticing from when you were telling me at the beginning about your life before that experience, you know, just not feeling certain of where life would take you, not really knowing what's out there. Seemingly working in a factory was the only option that was available, but it wasn't something that you're really into. And now you sound very fulfilled by the work that you do.
Yes, totally. It's, you know, as I say, when I worked on the construction sites, I wanted to be good at that work so that I could so I could sustain a living from it. But I wasn't, you know, I used to look at these guys plastering walls and stuff, and I think there's an absolute art form to what they're doing, and they just pull it out of the bag really quickly and easy, and I couldn't do it. And I just thought, "Is where do I fit in this world? What is, you know, where's my place?" I used to say to myself, I used to lie in bed at night and say, "How do you do life? How do you do it? How do you make these things work for yourself?" You know, I wasn't exactly looking for any great sort of. When I said I wanted to work in the music industry, it wasn't really coming from an egotistical point of view. Like I wanted to be a great rock and roll star. It was more that I wanted to be. Um, just have some kind of, you know, purpose in life. I wanted to have some kind of role that says, yeah, this is what you do, this is it. But yeah, so now I found that sense of wonder and that sense of purpose, and it's a very liberating feeling. Yeah.
So your life has changed quite a lot since that experience and for the good.
Yeah, it has, most certainly. And also, you know, this for me, it's not just about the creative elements in my life. It's just it's being able to talk to people like yourself and discuss my story and how it's affected me, and how hopefully it can help others. That's equally as important. You know, it's a really great feeling. You know, it's just, you know, it's just, if you can give in this life, if you can have any kind of career, or in this world where you're giving, then it's a wonderful feeling. We all know that, don't we? We all know that's that great feeling, even if it's a small thing, even if you just walk past. You know, if you've helped somebody in this life, just a very small favor. When you walk away, you feel great, don't you? It's a lovely feeling. You thought, "Oh my goodness, I've just helped that person. That was great. That was lovely that I was able to do that." And so, yeah, so that's given me an awful lot of sense of purpose in my life, and being able to share my experience and share it, um, and thankfully, again, that's why science is great, because without science, we wouldn't have the internet, or I wouldn't be able to talk to you now. It's great to be able to reach out and just share stories worldwide. It doesn't. I don't just have to jump on a plane and go out and uh, and speak to a group of people. You know, I'm reaching as many people as possible, and so that's a lovely feeling. Yeah.
You are. And your story, I think, is really meant to reach millions and millions of people and give them hope. And that's where I wanted to take our conversation to, because I want to acknowledge there's so many people struggling with depression, anxiety. It's almost like the depression pandemic out there. Grief as well, we talked about earlier, anger. Um, And there's also lots of people that sort of don't know how they're going to make it through the day, and they just live on not really certain of why it's all happening for them. Do you have any piece of advice for those people? Anything that you would share with them based on what you've learned so far in your life?
I would do, yeah, and that is to try and find some kind of faith in your life, because that's what was missing for me before, because I didn't have that faith, and I realized that, as I talked of earlier, that my guides had been with me throughout the whole of my life, and I just hadn't been able to connect with them. Whereas I now connect with them, almost daily. If I'm going through any struggles, I'll reach out and speak to my guides and connect with them and ask for their help. I'll ask God for help, and I'm not afraid to ask for it either. Because unfortunately, I think that's why I struggled with church when I was a kid, and that's because a lot of faiths have a lot of rules attached, and a lot of those rules make you feel slightly afraid to ask for help. Almost like you're not worthy in a sense. That I'm not at all bringing down any faith whatsoever when I say this, because I do actually believe that people who go to church and have a faith, it's they're in a much better place, and it's great if you can find a church. Churches are amazing places. You know, I remember walking into a church with a friend of mine who's agnostic, and he said to me, he said, it's amazing just walking into these places where, even though you he'd got no faith, that he sensed that the energy, the history of that place, and the energy was just so calming and beautiful and peaceful, and it was like a meditative state being there. So it's great just to sort of try to find some kind of faith, basically, and have also know that we are all loved, because that's one thing I learned in this other realm, was that when I talked about the unconditional love that was being given to me, I realized that I'd spent the whole of my life feeling unloved, even though my parents loved me. But I mean, I felt a sense I didn't love myself, basically. And I realized once I was in this realm that I suddenly felt self-love, and I felt that when I came back, that once I was armed with this self-love, then I suddenly felt self-worth. And the two are combined, and they're two very powerful forces, that self-love and self-worth, and it will help you to sort of make sense, and to also realize that that life is here to challenge us. All of us. It doesn't matter where we're coming from. That those challenges don't go away. And I'm not just talking about human life. I'm talking about the animal kingdom, birds, fishes, Mother Earth itself is being challenged constantly, and that's the law of the universe. And if we accept that is the law of the universe, that those challenges are there, then I also think it's important not to try as we do and say, I've got to overcome this quickly. I've got to get rid of this. I've got to go out and buy myself some new clothes. That will help me, and all those different things. No, actually accept if things go wrong, hold them, and hold them there, and keep them with you, and nurture that awful feeling that you're going through, and allow yourself some self-love, and and try not to overcome adversities instantly and look for a quick fix. Allow it to make its way through, and everything will eventually pass, and it will, even though you can't see it at that moment in time, things will get better, and resolve themselves. It's that is also the law of the universe as well. The universe wants us to keep recreating and moving forward, and that's what my take is. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I absolutely agree. I think it's so beautiful to hear you say that. And on the other hand, I think most of us in our daily lives, we're just we think we should be positive, we should be learning through every challenge that we have, and we end up just basically sweating the small stuff. This you receive an email that's not maybe too friendly, or the vacation you wanted to go on doesn't really go through, and it almost seems in those times that it's the end of the world.
Yeah.
And that's very much a first world problem, I have to say. But how do you deal with, these minor inconveniences, things that people tend to blow out of proportion? Do you have a way of dealing with that?
Yeah, I do. Um, one is meditation. Meditation's great, and I find that really useful. Um, and it helps me just to switch off from the busyness of the world. And especially with right now, because there's no denying it that we're going through very challenging times in our world, and I the other thing is, because we're going through such challenging times in the world, I think it's important to be mindful of how you take the news in that's fed to us, because we've got the internet now. That's the negative side of it, is that we're fed so much news, and it's everywhere, and it's the same story that goes out in the morning is rotated throughout the whole day, and there's a very and the news is sold to us with a sense of hysteria, and just be aware of that. Just be aware of how that news has been sold to you. It's nothing new. That's the way it was back in the days when it was just newspapers. When the Titanic sank, you see these old, the newspapers headlines was there: Titanic sinks, thousands die, and what have you. And that's how they got people to go out and buy their newspapers. So it hasn't changed. So there's a sense of sensationalism about the news. So what I tend to do is I listen to the news each day because I want to know what's going on in the world, but I switch it off after I've heard the story. I thought, here we go, right? They're now chewing on the bone here. Let's stop and switch it off. And it's not being in denial; it's just allowing yourself to reground yourself, if you like. Because if you're not grounded yourself, then you can't possibly deal with all the trauma that's happening worldwide. The other thing is sleep. Sleep is really important. It's like sleep literally, recharges our batteries. It cleanses our mind and cleanses our thought. It's like emptying the trash bin on our laptops. And that's what it's doing. Each time we sleep at night. So I try and get plenty of sleep and eat well and stuff, like all those different things, because that's what animals do. That's what they do. The whole animal kingdom, they sleep. You look at dogs all the time, especially in the winter. All they want to do is sleep. And what's wrong with that? That's because they're just following the laws of the universe. And we've forgotten to do that because we just feel like we've got to be busy all the time. We feel like we've got to be positive all the time. And I don't actually say that. I don't say to people, look, you need to be positive. I don't think you do. I think that's the whole thing to try and avoid telling yourself. From my own perspective, it is try to, because it's putting added pressure onto your life if you feel, only because that's the media. That's the way the media is. The media is very much it's an unconscious being, in a sense.
Absolutely. Do you think life is happening to us or for us?
Again, it's going back to what I'm saying. It's happening. It's happening for us, even the tough times, because without adversity, without challenge in your world, in your life, then there's no growth. There's no spiritual growth. And we all find that, we're all the tough times we've been through, we come out and we are a lot stronger from it. That we become, stronger people, and we're able to deal with issues from that adversity. So that means that even the tough times, yeah, they're happening. They're part of our highway. That is the way I try and look at it. I look at road trip through life is just one highway, and there's going to be, all sorts of dust balls thrown across that highway as we go along, and each one that we avoid, we feel a lot better afterwards.
Lovely. It's been such a good conversation, and I could honestly just sit here talking to you and listen to you for hours.
Thank you.
But my last question is, how can people connect to your work? How can they find out more about you? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, well, you could go to my website, which is it's called shineonthestory.com, where you'll find all the links to my social media. If you want to follow me there, you can see what all the different things are coming up, and you can see my paintings and what have you. Or you can just Google in my name, and you will find me there. If you Google in David Ditchfield, I usually come up, and you'll see my social media links there. So yeah, that's probably the best way to go about it. And also, if you want to listen to my music, actually, the first symphony that I composed, which is called The Divine Light, which is based on my near-death experience, you can stream that for free on my SoundCloud page, or if you go to the actual website, you can stream it there and have a listen and see some of the paintings as well.
So there's things that I figured out over time, and there's things I still don't quite understand. I think an NDE is a lifetime learning. It's been teaching me lessons my entire life. So when I was 17, just before my 18th birthday, here in the United States, we go to high school up until we're 18. So I was a senior in high school before going off to college. And I I was in a show. So I grew up as a kid at a very early age. I came from a very working class family, and my family didn't really know the arts. But I was the kid that was the last born, and I was really into the arts. I was really into going to museums. My family didn't even know what to do in a museum. Like, I wanted to see plays. My parents had never even gone to see a play, right? I love movies, and I love performance, and I love music and all that type of stuff. My grandfather was a fill-in banjo player in vaudeville. So this is way back in the days, 100 years ago, right? Vaudeville was the entertainment of the day. We didn't have TV, there was radio, and there was vaudeville, and he played the banjo. And when they needed a banjo player, he would jump in sometimes. And for some reason, that always excited me. That resonated with me. This idea of being in these vaudeville shows. And I don't know if you know about vaudeville shows, but they're like sketches, kind of like a Saturday Night Live in a way, where you have maybe somebody singing, maybe somebody's dancing, maybe somebody's doing magic tricks, maybe somebody else is doing a contortionist act, or maybe there's a comedian, whatever. And I just loved that form of entertainment. So when I was 17, there was a vaudeville house in my neighborhood, and they actually did vaudeville shows with the evil villain with the mustache, and you booed and hissed when he came on the stage. And they called it the Red Hot Mama, the big voluptuous lady that was wearing a corset and very sexy, that whole thing. I just was in love with that. And I auditioned to be in a show, and I got in. And I was only 17, and my parents were very protective of me. And that opening night weekend, the show was a really great success. It was quite fun. There was an after party after the show, and my parents said I couldn't go. And I was very, very angry. And so that anger is something I'm still learning from. I was very angry because I was the good kid. My brother was sort of the black sheep of the family. I did what my parents said, and I felt like I was almost an adult. My 18th birthday was a couple months away, weeks away, and why wouldn't they trust me? But I was a good kid. I got on my motorbike. It was a Motobicane. You may know what those are. It was a European moped early on back in the day. And I had my little Motobicane, and I was driving home, and I that anger was really there. I was very much in my head thinking about, why don't my parents trust me, and how could they not let me go, and what do they think I'm going to do, all that type of stuff. And as I was driving into the suburbs, the show was in a little downtown area, And we lived out in the suburban, away from the city. And it was a 4-lane road, a big road that fed into the suburbs. And I was on that road. It was probably 10:30 or so at night. It's in the suburbs. Not a lot of cars are out. It's very quiet. There was a curve in the road where the road made a big S curve. And in that curve, there was a parked semi truck. And I was approaching that curve and the truck when, from out of nowhere, I didn't see anything until its lights went on, and it flashed in my rear view mirrors. So on the handlebars, there were some big mirrors. The lights flashed in those mirrors, and I realized that this car was going to hit me. And I had nowhere to turn. I had nowhere to go. I couldn't sneak around the semi truck. It was parked. The car was very close on my back end, and I just couldn't get around it. There was a sidewalk walk next to where the car was parked, but I wasn't very good at jumping curves. And there was a cyclone fence. Do you know those metal woven fences that they'll put around circuit security facilities and stuff like that? There was one of those fences right along the side of the street, and I really had nowhere to go. So in a split second, I decided to lay my bike down, and the person hit my back tire. My bike laid down. My consciousness jumped out of my body. So I ended up jumping out and watching my bike and watching my body. So I watched my bike hit the semi truck. I watched my body hit the semi truck. I watched the car drive away, and the bike and my body bounced out into the street. They hit and bounced out. And so I'm floating above the whole thing, watching as this is happening. And I remember thinking, wow, what a beautiful night this is. There was no anger, right? None of those feelings that I had just a few seconds ago were there. There was just this appreciation for this beautiful October, middle of October. It was the end of summer. We call it uh, like it was a warm beginning of winter, right? Everything's cooling down. The night was cool, autumn, fall day. The night was cool, but you could feel the heat radiating off the ground. So there was that, it was just beautiful. I think there was a bright moon, and I just remember thinking how beautiful this place was, watching the moon in the sky and smelling the night air. I could smell. I remember very succinctly smelling the night, that dampness that was in the air, and feeling the heat coming off the ground, and just being in this awe of how beautiful the world was. While I'm looking down at my body, and I'm looking at my body, and I can see that my leg is twisted underneath me, and my body's really messed up. And I remember even thinking, ooh, I don't want to go back there. That's bad. I don't want to go in that. And then the next minute or second or whatever, I was going down the tunnel. I did the proverbial tunnel. Not everybody does a tunnel, but I did the tunnel. And I was in a way shooting down this tunnel. So I was like a bullet going through this tunnel. And something that still intrigues me today is that the tunnel was corkscrewing, right? It wasn't just spinning like this, it was moving forward. So it was this forward movement where there was a rotation, but it was a forward rotation that was happening, like a corkscrew kind of energy. I'm shooting down this tunnel as the energy is doing that. I could see this beautiful light spinning and circulating, this amazing, brilliant light. And then suddenly I was on the other side, wherever that is, I don't know, but I wasn't in the tunnel, and I wasn't back where my body was. So I'm in this space. It's, again, absolutely beautiful. The closer I get to this place, the more my heart, as my consciousness, because I'm fully alert, my consciousness feels like it's expanding. I feel like there's so much love, there's so much beauty. Like, the experience of being on the other side was pure bliss, absolute joy. There's not enough adjectives to describe how amazing it is on the other side. It is so amazing, beautiful, gorgeous, blissful, happy. It is I don't know any language that has enough adjectives to describe it. And so when I give talks, because I've given talks at keynote speaking and stuff like that all over the world, and one of the talks I give is to say that death was the best thing that ever happened to me. Right? And I'm not recommending you remove yourself, you off yourself, and I am recommending that you enjoy this life, because whatever you do here, when we die, it's the most amazing, beautiful, glorious experience. Look forward to it. Really, truly. I wonder what it'd be like for those who are listening, you, whoever. I get myself in this place quite often. I wonder what it's like in the moment right now to look at life, whatever's happening in your life, whatever pain you may be feeling physically, whatever anguish you may be in mentally, whatever upset about politics or your health or money or whatever it is. I wonder what it would be like to live knowing that you can't get it wrong and that what's waiting for you on this other side is pure joy. I wonder what decisions you might make. I know what decisions I make when I get to that place, because I could be fearful. I could get stuck in the human drama. I could be worried. And when I remind myself, hey, you got nothing to worry about. Everything on that other side is pure love. There is nothing else but pure love. That's my experience. So I get there, I'm walking around, I'm feeling that expansive love, this just like painful bliss that I'm ecstatic experience. And while I'm bless you, and while I'm walking around, I'm curious because I still have my consciousness. I can see my body, I can see my clothing, I can see the space. The space is pure energy. I'm standing, but I can't really tell what I'm standing on. It's just pure light energy. I am aware I'm in a space, like there's walls and there's a ceiling and a floor. I can't see walls, ceiling, or a floor, right? It's just, again, pure energy. But I'm aware that I am held and that I am safe in this place and that it's a location, which is really interesting. Like you could put it on the map if there was a map. Okay. And I'm very curious. I start really thinking, well, where is everybody? I thought when you died, your dead relatives, my great grandmother, my dog that died, I thought they would be there for me. And I'm not upset, but I'm curious. I'm just thinking, wow, where is everybody? Like, isn't there supposed to be a welcome or something? Right. And as I'm exploring this place, I turn around and I see someone. Now, this person, as I see them, it feels like my chest is being broken open. Literally, it's painful. It's an ecstatic pain. I don't know if we humans have ever really truly can feel that. On the other side, though, it literally feels like my sternum is busted open, my ribs are being splayed out, and there's my heart is exploding out of my chest. And again, it's this painful, ecstatic experience. And while this is happening, I'm thinking to myself, what the hell? Why am I feeling this experience? Why am I feeling this bliss or this joy for this other person that I don't recognize, that I don't know? And maybe it's God. Like, there's that experience. Maybe it's the goddess, maybe it's divine energy, maybe whatever it is, this love is so powerful. And my still conscious brain is thinking, who the hell are you? And why are you Asian? I'm obviously not. And I'm seeing this man, and he looks like Lao Tzu. Do you know, have you ever heard of Lao Tzu or
Yeah,
Fu Manchu?
I
These
have.
very,
Yeah.
so Lao Tzu means, it translates from what I understand, is as wise old man, right? And there's this old man, and he has the Fu Manchu mustache and the long wispy beard, very stylized. He's wearing like a derby hat. He has on a tweed suit. Why I'm noticing this information, I still don't know. I could see the really thick tweed of his suit, the fabric. And I'm thinking, a thought pops into my head of Hong Kong, 1890. No idea. Maybe that's where he was from or where his clothing was. I have no idea. But I'm thinking all of this again as my heart is ripping out of my body. And there's this experience of pure love for this other human being. And again, the curiosity continues. And he appears the way that I like to describe it, that I think people understand, is if you ever saw a sci-fi movie or Star Wars, and there's a Princess Leia on the holograph or Obi-Wan Kenobi on the holograph. And you can see, you know who they are. You could hear them. You could see them. They have shape. They have form. They have the clothing. You can see all of that. And at the same time, they're translucent. There's like a translucent, clear, like energy. You could see through them or you could see them. Like there's that experience where they're projected in a way. That has always been fascinating to me because later I got a degree in quantum theory and theology, and to think that our world is a holograph. It's been said in science that we live right here, right now, in a holographic experience, right? And there I am on the other side viewing this person who appears to be a holograph. So I turn to him, I see him, we connect. This lasts for a while, feels like such a long time. And his comment to me is why are you here? You're not supposed to be here. And some of that anger starts to come in because I was feeling rejected or unloved, right? There's this blissful higher level experience, as well as there's some of this human experience happening at the same time. And that, again, is another important thing that I taken into my own private therapy practice and in my own life, right? This idea of a higher self and a human self existing at the same time. On the other side, there was the higher self first and the human self second, right? Here, there's the physical human self and then the higher self. And over there, I told this person, God, whoever it was, I gave them the double birdie. I don't know if it's safe to, I did that. And I told them to F off. Because I did not want to go back. I knew what my body, the condition of my body. I was not very happy as a kid. I never felt loved. I never felt accepted. I never felt, well, it's not that I never felt loved. I didn't feel loved as a teenager. I didn't feel accepted. I didn't feel like I was safe. I didn't feel like I had a home. Now, my family was wonderful, but I didn't fit in, right? I just didn't fit into this suburban community, right? I didn't fit into this sort of working class family that I was born into. I was the oddball in that family. And I didn't want to go back. And when he said I had to go back, that it wasn't my time, I got very angry. And within seconds of that experience, I was back floating over my body. And I had left that other side. I had left that beautiful, blissful energy. Now, I wasn't in pain. I was back kind of at the experience where I had jumped out of my body and watched all of it, right? Before my body even hit that semi-truck, I was already out. So I was back in that place, sort of floating above my body. I watched the EMTs, the emergency vehicle, come. I watched two men get out of the vehicle. I watched them take a gurney out of the back of the vehicle. I watched one of them come over while the other one was preparing the gurney. He was checking for vital signs. Um, when he was checking for those signs, like there was a hand on my neck. His face was like this close to my face. I was guessing he was trying to see if I was breathing, if he could hear a breath or feel a breath. Uh, and this still makes me laugh because I quickly jumped into my body and I opened my eyes and I told him to take me to the hospital, and my insurance card was in my back pocket. And doing that must have scared the crap out of him. I don't know if you guys know Winnie the Pooh or Tigger.
Yeah,
It's an
for
old,
sure. Yeah.
old cartoon. So Tigger, the cat. So Tigger jumps. Well, this man, he was a very big man. He jumped all fours. Like he's kneeling on the ground. He was at least 200 and something pounds. He went up in the air like a cat, like Tigger, just boing up in the air, which I thought even at the time was the funniest thing. I jumped out of my body. I watched them take my body, put it on the gurney, put it in the vehicle, close the doors of the vehicle, turn on the siren, and drive away. I watched that whole thing. I wasn't going to go into my body. I didn't want to be alive. I didn't want to go back. I would love the other side. And that's something we can talk about too, because I think it's common in people that have died at a younger age to have that yearning to go back. And so I didn't want to go back. And I remember thinking to myself, I guess this is how ghosts are made. Because I didn't want to go in my body, and my body was torn up. And I was thinking before, like, what if the EMTs wouldn't have shown up and somebody would just driven across my body, pulverized it, right? What if that would have happened? I'm not on the other side. I'm not in heaven or wherever that place was. I'm not in physical form, but I'm floating around. And so I thought, well, this must be ghost. This must be what it's like to be a ghost. And I was very happy to stay that way. My next memory, I opened my eyes. I was in my body. I was looking up at the drop ceiling that you get at medical facilities, those horrible, ugly asbestos sort of tile drop ceilings. I was looking up at that and I was thinking, crap. I don't want to be here because I wanted to see that beautiful, white, energetic, amazing energy of the other side. And when I say white, I don't necessarily mean, I don't know how to describe it. If you've ever looked at a prism, like a glass prism, when the sun shines through it and you get that refracted light, like the rainbows that you see, all the colors that shine off of the crystal or the prism, that's very much what it was like. It was all light, and there was this dominant white energy, but there was every color that you could possibly imagine all happening at the same time. It was stunningly beautiful. So that's my death experience.
It's so amazing. And one thing that I noticed is that you're very angry before, so you weren't fitting into your life. And then you come back, you must have been even angrier.
Oh, I was pissed off. Right. So I
That's
don't know if I met Lao Tzu. I describe him as looking as like Lao Tzu, the wise philosopher, the wise old man. But I don't know if that was him. I just used that way of explaining what he looked like. I don't know who this person was. All I know is that I was obsessively, ecstatically in love with them. The only way I can imagine it is like if you ever saw an angel, like if you ever had that experience of maybe seeing an angel and that heavenly light, that heavenly form, that divine being, that this was my version of a divine being. I have no idea why. I have no idea why that I have the divine as showing up as Lao Tzu. Right? Well, it wasn't my time. So it makes sense that the family wasn't there. One of the things I learned, and I have a very strong spiritual life now that's evolved from that experience. I'm a lay minister in the particular faith that I practice, and one of the things I take away from my death experience is that accidents do happen. A lot of people in the spiritual community say there's no such thing as an accident. Everything has been planned out. Everything happens. It happens for an absolute reason. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. And we all may be going to a particular point. In my life, I am going to end up at a particular place and time. How I get there is my free will, right? And if we have free will, there's billions of us running around, all making choices, all doing things, and we're going to bump into each other, right? There's going to be an accident, right? And maybe it was destined for me to eventually come to that place. And maybe it was an accident. The heaven or wherever it was obviously wasn't ready for me, right? It wasn't my time. They weren't ready for me. Now, could that be part of the divine plan that I was supposed to die and then I was supposed to get removed from there and that? Sure. And it doesn't feel right on a cellular level when I say that. What feels right on a cellular level is that there was an accident. Someone made a choice to hurt me, right? Someone made a choice to get in their car, to come behind my bike, to push my bike with their car. Somebody made a choice to do that. And I was the recipient of that anger, or I was a recipient of that abuse, or that whatever it was. I was that recipient. And this is another important thing that I learned, is that I was a victim to what this person did, but I'm not a victim to my life. Right? And I say one of the biggest parts of my healings was taking absolute unconditional responsibility. So I chose that accident. When I say I chose that accident, right? I can't be a victim anymore because I chose it, right? And then what I do with it is my choice. What I do after that, what I've done after that, right? Our culture, our world would encourage me to be a victim, to be upset, to be angry, to want punishment or justice, or to find this person. We never found the person. To find the person that did this to me. Our culture would encourage me to be in the pain and to have the pain and to feel sorry for myself and to be frustrated that what I wanted to be when I was 17 years old, and I wanted to be a dancer. I was discovered as a dancer. I was on my way to being very successful as a dancer. I had the body, like there's basketball player bodies, there's football player bodies. Well, I had a ballerina body. I had a dancer's body. And I could have been a victim to that. And I could, to this day, even be a victim to that energy and that thinking. And I say, absolutely not. I am not a victim. And I'm not a victim to this experience because I chose it. And it's a very different energy and a very different way to heal when you say, oh, I chose this experience. I chose I'm a therapist now. So if I could get a client to actually firmly, truly believe that they chose their anxiety, or they chose their family, or they chose the abuse that they suffered as a child, or they chose their tumor, or they chose their trauma, when we choose actively like that, right, then we go back into the position of power, right? We're not a victim. We're not being walked on. We are in the experience of, this is my life. This is my breath. This is my body. These are my thoughts. And I choose what I'm going to do next. So this is a lesson that took a long time to learn. Unfortunately, I didn't have somebody like me that would help or share that with me or support that. Everyone around me supported the victim, right? And how horrible and how sad and what a pity and that type of stuff. That's what was what I was given, even the medical profession, right? I was told I'd never be able to walk again. If I could walk, that it would be difficult. I'd have to have some sort of support, whether it was a cane or a brace or a walker or a wheelchair or something like that. I've used all of those things. My 40th anniversary of my death was in October of 24. So that was my rebirth day. I like to call it that because it really is like a being reborn experience. And this didn't happen over quickly. This happened over time. And so I eventually stopped feeling sorry for myself. I eventually started to recognize that, oh, wait, I create this life. I am co-creating this life. I'm co-creating this life with my body. I'm literally co-creating this life with my cells, with my bones, with my muscles. I had to teach myself how to heal. I had to teach myself how to walk again, right? I had to go through these experiences. And I think people make that mistake to put healing on everybody else, to put healing on the doctor or the chiropractor or the whomever. They are only helping you. They aren't actually doing the healing, because if you don't participate, you're probably not going to get better. We even know that scientifically. The people that believe they're going to heal, the people that see their healing, the people that just know it without a doubt that it's already happened, they heal. The people that don't, right? So how do you heal? Or how did I teach myself this? Right? I taught myself to believe. I taught myself to create and co-create. I understood that I need to create with the cells of my body as much as I need to create with the people around me, right? My friends and family members. I need to talk to them. At one point, I had something go wrong with me a few years ago, and I called a couple of friends and I said, I need you to know my well-being. I need you to know that without a doubt. And some of them couldn't do it. Some of them were like, well, that happened and it's only logical and you're going to have this experience and it's so sad and I'm so sorry. And I'm like, okay, well, I can't be your friend right now. I love you, but I need someone who believes and holds that vision with me, right? So I can't be around that energy. I need to be around the energy. I need you, even if you just struggle with that. I need you to do it for me. I need you to see me as I see myself, which is whole, perfect, and complete. Right? And that's a big part of my therapy practice. When people come to me as a therapist and I'm working with them, I see everybody I work with as whole, perfect, and complete. The anxiety or the addiction they're showing up with is an experience they're having, but it's not who they are. Right? That trauma or that abuse that was done to them is an experience they're having. It is not who they are. Right? And so to hold that vision and to know that vision with all of your body, to feel it, to see it, to smell it, to taste it, right? To actually create it, co-create it with all the tools of your brain and the people around you, right? It's said in multiple religions that when two or more people are gathered together, right, there is the divine. So we're holding that consciousness together. Even you and I right now are holding that consciousness right now. And in that holding that consciousness, that all is love, right? Or whatever it is, that you are whole, perfect, and complete, no matter what you're physically, mentally, or spiritually thinking or feeling right now. Underneath that, the truth of you is that you are whole, perfect, and complete. And as we hold that consciousness, it takes form in the physical world. And so that was a big part of my learning. It took me a long time to learn that. And I didn't talk about my near-death experience. I didn't talk about it for a long time because it wasn't okay in my family or in the world I lived in. This was 40 years ago. This type of stuff was considered really strange. So to talk about it, that was a big deal. So my message is a little bit bigger in that we need to love all the parts of us that are suffering. What our habit is, what we're taught to do in the Western world and the Eastern world very much, is what we're taught to do is these parts of us that are suffering, we're taught to cut them out, to throw them away, to push them aside, to shove them down, to drug them, right? We're taught to hide them. They're wrong and bad. They cannot be seen. And all that does is perpetuate the pain. So I explain it this way. I say, what if you, Sabrina, were my pain? What if you were the image of my pain? Right? And nobody else can see you, but I can see you. I see you very clearly. I see you right there. I see your face. I see how you feel. I see how you respond to things, right? So you're this part of me that's suffering. And if I don't want to, if I said this to you, and I'm not going to direct it to you, but if I said what we would say to those parts, I'd say, I hate you, Sabrina. I can't stand you. I wish you just go away. I'm ashamed of you. I'm embarrassed of you, right? Is that helping? If you're the part of me that's suffering and I speak to you that way, how would exactly, like if I was your pain and you did that to me, I'd be like that little chihuahua. I would just keep biting and barking at you. I just like, no, 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 no. I would not stop. I'd be like, you going to treat me like that? I'm going to really knock you down. Right? Now, if instead I said to you, Sabrina, I'm so sorry you're suffering. You're this part of me. I feel your pain. I feel it. I see it. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you're suffering. And instead of beating you up, instead of being ashamed of you, instead of making you wrong, instead of wanting to cut you out or drug you, instead of doing that to you, Sabrina, I'm going to love you. And I'm going to let you know that I love you. And I'm going to do whatever I can to share that love with you. And maybe at this point, I'm still mad at you, so I can't hug you, but I'm going to send love to you. I'm going to, in my mind, shower you in a beautiful golden light. I'm going to send the thoughts that are loving and kind to you. When I speak about you, I'm going to speak about you with loving words. And I'm just going to constantly tell you, I love you, I love you, I love you. I'm so sorry. Now, if you were that part of me that's suffering and I said that to you, how would you feel?
I mean, I think I would feel understood and seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it feels better, doesn't it, than what I said previously, right? Right?
Yeah.
So now I'm working with you, right? Now, instead of my working against you, I'm working with you. And maybe even my next step, I could say, Sabrina, what can I do to help you? How can I help you heal? What I've done, be mad at you, drug you, cut you out, punish you. It's not helped. So what do you want from me? How can I help you right now feel better? What can I do right now in this very moment? Right? And when we do that and we learn to listen, like truly listen, right? And I think we listen with more than our ears, to listen with your heart, to listen with feeling, to listen with color, to listen with temperature and texture, to listen with a sound, to listen with a taste, right? Because you are part of me and you have access to all the parts of me. So you may want to communicate with me by color. You may not communicate with me by words. You may communicate with me by feeling. You might show me a picture, or you might play a pretty sound, or a very easy and comforting sound, right? And so then I want to give that back to you. I want to give you that experience. So if it's anxiety, and we're talking about the anxiety, what if I even said to you, you're part of me that's scared? Because that's what anxiety basically is, right? It's projecting fear, right? You're a part of me that's scared. You may have a very good reason to be scared. What if you're trying to protect me? Now, maybe I don't need protection. Maybe that fear comes from when you were 5 years old and you're still trying to do that. And now me as the adult, right? Well, that doesn't work anymore. right? So what if I went to you, right? And I started working with you and I said, I'm so sorry you're suffering. I know you're trying to protect me. One of the ways you're trying to protect me is when there's a threat. You want me to fight. You want me to flee and run away. You want me to maybe hide or maybe just freeze and act like it's not happening. Right? Isn't that often the trauma response? Fight, flee, freeze, or hide, right? So you're doing that, and I want to get on the plane. But all of a sudden, as the part of me that's suffering, you're saying to me, run away. This is dangerous, right? Because maybe when you were a kid, you had an experience that flying was scary. And the adult self is saying to that part, and what if instead of letting you run the shop, what if instead I said, I see you. I'm so sorry. I know you want to run away right now. And we are going to get on that plane because what's on the other side is so amazing. We're going to go see friends. We're going to go see family. We're going to go on adventures. It's going to be so good, Sabrina. It's going to be so good. So how can I help you? I appreciate you're trying to protect me. How you're doing it doesn't work anymore. I hear you. And often when we recognize that this part's trying to protect us in its way, fight, flee, freeze, hide, it's trying to keep us safe, it often goes, oh, okay. All right. Right. And then when we take it that next step and say, so how can I help you feel safe and get on that plane? Right. So I'm changing the conversation because when we're in that experience of the fear, it's often, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel this way? I don't want to feel this way. Why am I feeling this way? I'm so mad at you for feeling this way. Right. Now I'm saying, I understand your feeling. I'm sorry you're feeling this way. And how can I help you do what you really want to do, which is get on the plane and go explore the world? How can I help you do that? So now again, I step into my power. I'm not the victim to my anxiety, right? I'm not being controlled by the anxiety. I'm recognizing it. I'm seeing it for what it is. I'm saying thank you to it. I appreciate what you're doing. And now I want to work with you. That makes primary place is my website, which is convergencehealing.com. That's my brand. And I'll spell it. It's CONVERGENCE healing. Convergence, like coming together, convergencehealing.com. My first book you can see up here. I don't know if you can see that. That was my first book with Simon and Schuster. It was called Convergence Healing. And that's about loving your pain. So they could connect with me through there. My anxiety book, Billy and the Anxiety Monster, is about loving the anxiety. That book's been so successful and fun. I've turned it into a coloring book and an activity book. And my next book that's going to come out probably at the end of 25 or 26 is called When Happiness is Work, and that's about loving your depression. So I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. I'm exploring TikTok. That's new to me. I have lots of videos on YouTube. So you can go to my channel. It's also Convergence Healing. And I work with people all over the world. So you can connect with me pretty much through social media and through my website.